Okay, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on this Sunday evening, wherever you are. I think from the names, I guess people are from Myanmar and from Nepal, possibly Vietnam and Thailand with us at the moment. My name is Dr. Roger Livermore. I'm the Dean of the School of Management, and I would like to go through and introduce you to this session and to the guest speaker. I'll start off by just providing one or two details about why we're running what we call a teaser, a summary of a webinar that gives an idea about short courses that the Asian Institute of Technology is providing, particularly in the new subject areas that we're focusing on in the management school. One of those is in digital transformation, but the other one that we're focusing on is on finance, and this is where this evening's presentation fits in. So we have an MSc program, which is starting in August, which is international finance, with a heavy emphasis on what's going on in ASEAN. And as part of that, we have people that would like to join this particular series of courses as a short course over 14 or 45 hours. And we are working with a part of the Asian Institute of Technology to enable people who are working in different parts of Asia to actually join those classes via video link in the next year. So one of those courses is an introduction to statistics for finance. And this is where this evening's guest speaker comes in, who is a professor who is based at the moment in Hong Kong. Shortly will be moving to the United States. He's had over 20 years working in financial services. His current role is head of strategy for a finance company that focuses partly on blockchain. And he's going to go through and give you around about a 20 to 30 minute introduction to finance and statistics. And then we'll take Q&A. The Q&A, the questions and answers, please could you go through and use the Q&A function at the bottom of Zoom. If you look at the bottom of the box, there is a chat box, but we would like you to try and use the Q&A function because that's an easier function for us to do the question and answer session at the end of Chris's talk. But without further ado, I would like to invite the guest speaker to his presentation. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Doctor. Much appreciated. As Roger said, I've worked in financial markets for about 25 years now. I fell into financial markets by accident. I actually studied physics and mathematics, and so I am what people would call a quant when you talk about financial markets. I am someone who really enjoys mathematics and has a feel for it. I understand most people don't. And what I want to talk about today is what mathematics is, what it does. I want to prove to you that you are individually mathematically talented, and I want to show you some of its utility and take you through a bit of that, just to have a bit of an understanding of where math fits into the world of finance and business. Beyond that, also the purpose of tonight, as I see it, is for you to get a feel for the Asian Institute of Technology and its School of Management, the new efforts it's making and the new directions it's trying to move in, and just get a feel for what it's like to take a class with AIT and go from there. So if you have any questions at all, please let me know. Roger asked that you use the Q&A. So please check in with that. If you need something, raise your hand, tap, please interrupt me. We're here for you. So I just as soon have a discussion as opposed to me just going on the entire time. So towards this end, as I mentioned, I'm someone who likes numbers. I understand that most people, the broad base of people, are not naturally big fans of mathematics and numbers, but there's an important reason why we have to have a good feel for being numerically literate, being able to work with numbers in business and in finance in particular. And that is because don't think of numbers as being mathematics, being a separate topic. Think of it as being a language. And I've lived in Asia long enough to know that being able to speak several languages is very important to our business success. English, of course, Mandarin Chinese, quite useful, whatever the local tongue or dialect might be. The more languages you can speak, the better you can communicate, the better you can understand. And you should really think of anything to do with numbers and finance as being a language. For many years, I worked in a broker, a few different brokers. I worked for Daiwa, Nomura. Some of you on the call, being that this is Asia, might know CLSA. And when I worked for these firms, I had different roles, but for a period of time, I was a head of research. So I had to look at analyst reports. They were producing these reports. We were paying them a lot of money. and these were the product going out the door, and I would have to check these. And my favorite technique when judging the quality of a report was first to look at the numbers. Most people would read the text first and then start to look at the numbers. But for me, I thought it important to look at the numbers first. Because if you understand the numbers, if you understand the use of numbers within finance, you're speaking that language. And the numbers are telling you a story. You can see if a company is facing diminished growth. You can see if it has problems with interest payments and if it's overly indebted. You can see if it's paying a chunky dividend, but not doing it from operating cash flow, but doing it from reserves. These things all jump out and they tell you about that company's strategy as soon as you see these. After you look at the numbers, go through and read the text, because the text should fit in with what the numbers are saying. If not, either the analyst missed something, perhaps the analyst is telling the wrong story, there's something wrong there. But the numbers are at the center of it. The numbers are really a language. And when we're thinking about the utility of this language then, here we go, excuse me, let me just share my screen real quick. What my goal is when we're teaching a statistics course for MBA students or Masters of Finance students is to make sure they feel comfortable with being able to use those numbers. What do they mean? What do they not? And importantly, understanding that when you're using these numbers, you don't always get exactly the answer you want. It's not the same as being in a business school environment. One of the things that I like about the program AIT has put together for its Masters of Finance program is that it is very much focused on practice. So they have a number of academics who are teaching important theory, but they also have people like myself who are practitioners who come in to further discuss and further work on some of the aspects of application. And this for me is a critically important part of understanding how to work in markets. And again, this ties back to being numerate and being able to work with numbers. So really, what you need to work on if you're going to be working in finance is not to be the best mathematician out there, but just to feel comfortable using the numbers, understand what different measures mean, understand how things are put together, and to be able to communicate in that language. And that's the goal of this full course that we do here at AIT, trying to help people feel comfortable with and fluent with that degree of statistical knowledge. Now, the first thing I'd ask, and I don't know if people can come back to me in the Q&A or if the chat's going to be easier here, is there anyone on this call who feels that they're not good at mathematics? Anyone at all? Everyone's a genius mathematician on the call?
I'm not.
Or they're just not commenting?
I'm not.
Roger, you say you're not good at mathematics. Could I ask you to share your screen for a moment so we can see you?
Give me 1 second.
I'm going to give you a quick math test.
Let me go through and just share the screen. Yep.
Click the proper buttons. And the rest of you can try this at home wherever you happen to be as well if you'd like to try. I'm going to ask Roger to take a pen or something light, something easy, and just toss it up in the air and catch it when it comes back down. Roger, you told me you're no good at math, but you caught it.
Thank you.
You caught it perfectly. And the reason I'm saying this is because people like to say that they're not good at mathematics. But if we go back to me sharing my screen, and let me get that sorted out again there. I hope everybody now can see my screen and see this fairly complex mathematical formula, including derivatives and all sorts of interesting terms here, a natural log. That is a portion of the equation that Roger just solved in order to catch that pen. And that goes on and on and on for about 15 pages, actually. And the point I'm trying to make here is that math is actually something that everybody is very good at, because math is at the core of why the brain evolved in the first place. Math is what we use to control movement. You are naturally, on a daily basis, doing a great deal of highly complex, highly advanced mathematics. So I'm confident everybody on this call can handle the math, no problem whatsoever. Now the challenge is, right now it's being done subconsciously. Your brain's doing this for you without consulting you. It's not asking you, is it the natural log? Is it the first derivative, the second derivative, any of that stuff? It's just doing the work for you. But the fact that you can do it means that all it is, especially for the fairly basic statistics we're going to be doing for this course, all it is just making sure that you can translate it. You can take those natural skills and talents that you already have, unlock them, understand them, and use them as a tool for all of your future classes, all of your future work in finance. So that's what we're going to focus on. So my first point tonight would be to say to you that all of you are necessarily quite good at math. And if you doubt that, throw something up in the air, catch it. You've just demonstrated that you can solve a much more complex equation than what's already sitting there on the screen. Now, in addition to understanding the formula and understanding what's happening with getting an answer, the most important thing for me is how can you use this? If you were a math major, then fine. I teach you mathematics for the sake of knowing the math. But all of you are looking at careers in business or finance. And so we don't want to know the math just to know the math. We want to know the math because we want to make use of it. So it's beyond the formula. It's making sure that we understand how we analyze a situation, how we think of a problem, and what we do to really dive into a better understanding of the world around us because of the statistics. In this example here, let's say that I would offer all of you a free vacation. This is 6 months in the future, 1 year in the future when people can travel again, and you're being offered a free vacation. This is hypothetical, by the way. A friend of yours has invited you to go on a trip to a wonderful place. The average temperature is 26 degrees Celsius. The sun almost always shines, and the beaches are huge and covered in a beautiful fine sand. Who wants to go on a vacation to this wonderful holiday destination? You can send me a message in the chat, Q&A. Who's interested in a wonderful trip to this great average temperature, 26 degrees Celsius resort location? Okay, we have one person there. So one volunteer, thank you, sir. Now, unfortunately, I said the average temperature is 26 degrees. Average is a fairly simple statistical technique. It's one of the things that we talk about in the course, but more than talking about how you compute it, we talk about what it really means and how dangerous it can be. Average is one of the most dangerous methods used in business statistics. Because to use this case as an example, when we're talking about the average is not necessarily indicative of the high or low on any given day. And in this particular case, that average temperature I'm talking about is from a place in the United States called Death Valley. And yes, we'll get you the gin and tonic along with that too, so we'll make sure you're taken care of. But I think the gin and tonic would go very quickly in this location because the average is 26, but that's an average that's composed of temperatures during the summertime. They get up to 48, 50 degrees Celsius. And then nighttime temperatures during the winter time that get down below freezing. So when we're talking about average, we have to be very careful because average doesn't really tell us very much about what we're going to experience. It tells us the midpoint. And even then, are we talking about the median, the mode? Which type of average are we discussing? There's a good friend of mine who teaches accounting courses, and when he teaches accounting courses, he is always concerned about people focusing on the average. And he'll tell people, don't be that guy. That guy is the one who has 1 foot in a bucket of boiling water, 1 foot in a bucket of ice. And as the 1 foot is being burned away and the other foot is freezing and getting frostbite, he says, on average, the temperature is quite pleasant. So stepping back from temperatures, think of it in a business sense. Let's say you're running a business and someone tells you that your average cost is a certain amount. You don't really care about the average cost. What you want to know is your marginal cost when you're making a business decision, your marginal contribution. What is the impact of your decision going to be? You can have average profitability, make more and more and more, and actually lose more money. So we need to be very careful when we're talking about the terms. And one of the things we do at AIT when we talk about statistics is not just run through the formulas, which for the descriptive statistics like this are quite straightforward. But we go beyond using the formulas to try to make sure we understand where they can go wrong, what's dangerous. My expectation when I teach people is that the reason you're in a program like this is that you expect some point soon in your career to be a team leader, running an office, the CEO, the head of the desk. And as that person, you will constantly be given information, constantly be given data and summary analyses. Other people will give you their statistics. And one of the key talents you need to develop is the ability to look at a report that someone's giving you and say, this is the number I need to be careful about. You need to be a critical consumer of statistics. Yes, you need to know how to do some of the basic statistics yourself. But far more importantly, you need to know when people give you those statistics, what you should question, where you should be careful, where it is that the statistics might be used either to intentionally or, we would hope unintentionally, steer you in a dangerous direction. So you can head that off and make good decisions as a business manager. And it's not just with things such as average. So correlation. If you are told reliably, so this is a true fact, that the correlation between two variables is 0, can we then presume that the two variables are independent? So we have two variables, we measure the correlation between them and we get 0. So no correlation between those. Are they independent? What do you think? Somebody in this group, come on, jump in and let us know what you think here. We have a dozen or so people online. Be brave. We have two variables. The correlation between the two is 0. Are they independent? Dinley saying no. Dinley, why are they not independent? Correlation is supposed to measure the strength of the relationship between the two, no? What do you think? There's not an easy way for him to respond, so I'll jump in and offer the suggestion from there. We need to be very careful with a number of the tools that we use in statistics, because correlation is a short way of saying linear correlation. You're trying to measure the linear relationship between two variables. And the truth of the matter is that if you were to take something like this, a circle, the formula for which is x squared plus y squared equals 1, and if you were to take the correlation of that solution set, the correlation would be 0, because there is no straight line involved in that circle. It's a circular relationship, not linear. And so because of this, the linear correlation measurement will be 0, but there's an obvious relationship between those two variables. If I know what x is, I know there are up to 2 possible values of y, and I know exactly what those 2 are. So I have a great degree of insight. We find the same thing with regression. One of the most dangerous things, it's a great thing in many ways, but it's a dangerous thing in many ways, is when Excel put regression tools into its software. So now anyone with a software can run a regression, because running a regression is a wonderful tool for understanding a little bit more about what's happening with data and trying to get to the core of the relationships, but you have to do it properly. You need to understand, are you measuring the levels or are you measuring the change? Typically, we would want to be measuring change when we're doing regression work. You want to make sure that you're looking at things that are expected to be linear. You need to look at the data and see if it is linear. You need to look at your sample set and see if that's truly indicative. Is the past history you're using to run the regression and to develop the statistics going to be indicative of what's happening in future? All of these are techniques that you need to do properly. They're really pretty straightforward, but you need to make sure that you look at the problem from the right perspective. And that's one of the things at AIT that with the Master in International Finance, the school focuses on, making sure you have those practical tools, the practical skill set and knowledge so that you can sensibly and fairly quickly look at the results and understand what it's really telling you. As I said at the beginning, quantitative techniques, numbers, statistics in business are really just another language. If you're sitting on a trading desk, you will talk in a mixture of English and numbers. The numbers are just an easier, quicker way of describing certain situations. What we need to do to help you in developing your career is bring up your confidence and your fluency in discussing numbers. It's quite possible some of you on this call are already completely fluent in statistics. And if so, we'll find avenues to explore for you that have to do with that concept of how we interpret the numbers, what we look at, what we understand. How can we really judge what's working and what's not? One example of this that we look at is how we look at making decisions with incomplete information. You may have seen this image before or images like this. And this image tells us a lot about how our brain works. Our brain doesn't analyze each and every step of a problem. Our brain is always looking to save time, make things easier. And so it's looking to jump ahead a bit. And so when our brain looks at this image, it sees 4 feet, it sees an elephant, and it ties together the elephant to the 4 feet. But as you start to look closer, you realize that it doesn't tie together. It doesn't fit. It's not right. But your brain keeps switching back and forth because your brain's trying to find that solution for you. We have to be very, very careful when we're analyzing statistical solutions because your brain is always trying to jump ahead. Your brain's trying to make the decision for you. When you're using numbers in finance in particular, your brain experiences a large number of what are called behavioral biases that can shortcut and confuse and destroy the effort and time you put into your analysis. We want to make sure that doesn't happen. This case I'm showing you here, you might say, well, that's just a picture. I know better than that. But think about how this works with actual numbers. And to give you one example, this is some work done by an academic named O'Reilly, who at the time was at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So another IT technology institute that's out there besides the Asian Institute. And O'Reilly asked people to bid on a number of items that had some value. And they were given some certain amount of money with which they could do this bidding, and they wanted different things. So they were really trying to bid what they thought it was worth. But before he had them bid, when they wrote down their name at the top of the piece of paper, he had them write down a part of their identity number. And these were just the last 4 digits. And because they were writing down those last 4 digits, he was effectively giving everyone what was more or less a random number between 0 and 9,999. And after he did that, he then asked people to start doing the bidding. You can see here that people who had the lowest 20% of value of those digits had prices that were much, much lower, 2 to 3 times lower than people with the highest 20% of the digits. This is an example of something in finance that's called the anchoring effect. Oftentimes, I get called in to work with professional fund managers, analyst teams, groups who are looking at making forecasts and investing serious sums of money on the back of those forecasts to work with their analysts and their fund managers to talk about these types of biases. This has nothing to do with the mechanics of solving the math. It has nothing to do with the statistics directly, but it has everything to do with how we use them. Because you can use the math perfectly. You can use the statistics with great skill. But what matters, again, for the AIT Masters in International Finance program is that you can apply it, that you can use it, that you can make money for your firm, for yourself, through your knowledge of these numerical skills. And in order to do that, you can't fall into these types of traps. Or at least you need to try to limit the negative impact of these types of traps, I should say more carefully. All right, so in a nutshell, when we're talking about statistics at AIT, we're not talking about a course that is simply going to be a dry run through what the sample statistics are. How do we look at the normal distribution? How do we do regression? Yes, we will cover those topics. But more importantly, we're going to look at where we use it, how we communicate with the results, and how we make sure we don't fall into key traps and end up diluting all of the wonderful benefits from our good work. And in a nutshell, that's what the course is about. So I hope that that's something of an introduction to the course, to AIT's finance program. At this point, I would simply ask if anyone has any questions in the Q&A room there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Very nice presentation. And I'm looking forward to you teaching across the MSc in International Finance. We actually have quite a few professors who are in senior positions from Hong Kong who will be flying over or going through Zoom at the moment to be able to go through and teach across the MSc program. So I would like to encourage people to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions that you might have. Maybe I could go through and start off with the first question. And I mean, you know, I particularly don't have a very strong statistics background. I'm sure there are other people that will be taking the MSc program that also feel that they haven't got they're not an expert in this area. What type of jobs are there in finance for people who are not quite so strong at statistics?
That's a great question, actually, Roger. The truth of the matter is that there are some jobs in finance where you need to have very strong math skills, and more than the skills, you have to have a passion for it. But those are a limited number of jobs. Those are jobs like what I've done for much of my career. But there are many jobs where you have to have the basic understanding, which is what we teach in this course, and from there you can go anywhere. To give you some examples, the person who I consider my greatest mentor in the industry of finance, someone who had made various choices and helped me in ways that allowed me to make far more money than I ever deserved to, and to achieve a certain degree of success in the industry. That gentleman had studied journalism at university and never even finished his degree. So he didn't even have a degree, and he had studied journalism. The person at that firm who was my head of research was someone who had a degree in history. And when various topics and statistics would come up, I was the head of quant. On certain occasions, we would sit down and we would have discussions and chat, and we would talk. The key thing that both of those two had was the ability, the skill set, the talent to be able to jump in there and ask the right questions and look at what the statistics could or could not tell them, where they should trust it, where they should be more wary. So they had enough knowledge of working with the numbers, but they didn't have to worry about the specifics of what was going to be done. They could take the numbers from myself or other people and go from there. So there are many, many jobs in finance where you don't have to be a mathematician. There are a few you need to be a mathematician. The vast majority, no.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 12 attendees at the moment, and I would encourage you to use the Q&A function for this. We've got up to another 15 minutes to go, and it's be good to go through and ask Chris as many questions as possible in the time that we've got him. So I'd like to ask one other question, and that's related to what do you see the key takeaways from this particular course? So after 14 hours of looking at this subject area as a short course, what do you think the key 4 or 5 takeaways will be?
Okay, I'll answer that, of course, but first I'll also point out to the 12 attendees, Asian Institute of Technology, one of the things they're looking for are students who are going to be keen to participate and not be particularly passive. Part of the reason for that is myself, as someone who works in finance, when I'm looking to hire people, I want to hire people who are going to be involved and participating. So if you have any question at all, right now is a great time to ask it. Show us that you're not just sitting back, but you're keen and focused and working hard. Don't worry about levels of English skills or anything else. Roger would tell you I speak very poor English because I'm an American. I would joke about Roger's English. I've lived in Asia for 27 years now, and I can speak a variety of different languages, and I do what I can with with English, and I'm happy to talk with anyone. But in terms of what you take away from this course, importantly, and this is the bare minimum, you'll learn about calculating summary statistics. You'll learn about some of the key distributions and some of the key tests. So if I take a sample out of something, does that indicate that my assumptions about the broader population are true or no? With that, we'll look at some of the distributions, and we'll look at doing some work with regression. This will be a tool set that you can use in any of the courses that you'll be taking with the rest of your, whether it's a Master's of Finance, MBA, or even just in work. It's a nice tool set of skills to have. More importantly than that, for me, I want you to be able to talk with someone about numbers. I want you to understand when someone says to you, the average is 26, I want you to know what questions to ask. The average is 26, what's the maximum? What's the minimum? What's the standard deviation? Can you show me the data visually? Can we look at that? One of the key things I'll try to drive home to you, and this is something when I'm working with quants, people with advanced degrees in mathematics, I insist that they always try to look at the data. Jump in there, look at it, and find various ways to visualize what's happening, because that tells you a great story right there. So I want to make sure that you feel comfortable understanding that calculating a number is not the same as understanding what the data is trying to tell you. That calculation is a summary way of describing it. It's not the same as the real thing. If I were to ask one of you to meet a friend of mine let's say in a shopping mall someplace, and you didn't know what that person looked like, I might say to you, well, they're quite tall, they're thin, they have black hair, I'll give you a short description. That's not the same as looking at the person in real life. There will be differences. And so I want to make sure that you understand that. And then finally, I want to just a little bit expose you to these ideas of biases in our decision-making, because ultimately the statistics is about making decisions. You use the statistics to make decisions, to be able to work within the market, to be able to drive your analysis. And you need to be aware, at least somewhat, of how these decisions can go awry. So those are the three things that I would really try to drive home. And I would expect that after 14 simple hours, everybody should walk away with a good foundation in those three topics.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left for anybody else to ask a question. I do have my final sort of follow-up question. Just wonder if you could talk a little bit more about your career and especially your journey through finance, and where do you see it going in terms of opportunities in the finance industry in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, for opportunities, I'd suggest for a more detailed discussion of that, log in about 20 minutes time or so. And I think it's a different channel within Zoom, but I'll be talking about the other course I'm teaching this coming term at AIT, which is on the business of finance. So looking at how the world of finance is changing, looking at how things are evolving, and with that, the many opportunities that are open for people like you. I fell into finance by accident. As I mentioned, I studied physics and mathematics. I always thought I would be a physicist. I had also studied Chinese, the Chinese language, and this was back in the late 80s. So way before all the smart people were studying Japanese. I, for all the wrong reasons, studied Chinese, and I got lucky that my knowledge of Chinese became a very useful skill for me. I ended up in Hong Kong. I started working for a finance firm because I thought it was good if I knew a bit of mathematics, and originally did risk models, recognized that the brokers were being paid way more. They were my clients, and they were getting paid far more than I was. And so I made the move to be a broker and worked for many years as a broker, a long time at CLSA. I had a great time. Back then it used to pay very, very well. These days it can pay well, but it's not as easy as it used to be within that particular area of finance. And then the past few years with broking not being as attractive as it used to be, I've been focusing more on fintech startups. So I've been involved with a few different fintech startups. I'm still involved with several of them, trying to help them get enough traction. We've gone through some fundraising rounds. We've signed up live clients. The firm where I spend the majority of my time right now, Hex Trust, has clients, has revenue, has investors. We're doing quite well. Knock on wood, it will work out. And that also goes back to this concept of where things are going and that the future potential, because this ties in with issues of blockchain and digital assets and security issues, a number of topics that 15 years ago no one would have thought about, but these days are quite important and a great opportunity for people to develop careers and make a good bit of money. So if you want the more detailed discussion, we'll have that coming up shortly. That's going to be at, what time is that? 7 o'clock your time, I believe, or 7 o'clock Bangkok time, I should say. I'm not sure what time everybody's on. Yeah, there's still great opportunities out there. I got lucky, I fell into it. If you want to be a little bit more thoughtful about it, then there are steps you can take and things you can do. And that's part of what AIT's program is about, is trying to prepare people for a new future in finance.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it'd be quite useful for us to work out where everybody is in the call today. So if you could use the chat box just to say whereabouts are you, which country, which city are you in, and as you do that, if anybody has a final question for Chris, then please ask it. But please, could you use the chat box just to let us know? So we have one person from Bhutan. Great. But Chris also teaches. Do you want to say a few words about your teaching in Bhutan?
I was just going to say, are you familiar with RIGS? So we have two from Bhutan, it appears. So I teach occasionally at RIGS, the Royal Institute for Governance and Strategic Studies in Bhutan. And it's always a great pleasure. I've taught there for about 5 years now. I teach a course that's for senior government officials, basically people who want to become ministers. And most recently, I taught a course for the new parliament. And that was quite enjoyable and quite interesting. So yes, so I'm in Bhutan fairly frequently.
Maybe if we can hear from other people as well. Do we have anybody from Nepal?
Looking at the names, do we have anyone from India or Pakistan by any chance?
I think Bangladesh.
Bangladesh?
If I could encourage you to use the chat box, just I think there's probably one person at least from Myanmar as well. If so, which city in Myanmar, and how many from Thailand?
Well, the one closing comment I'll make there is people are not jumping in on the chat. If you want to work in finance, you do have to be ready to jump in. So that will be one thing to work on, and certainly something you can hone through your participation in the program.
Okay, Chris. Well, I'd like to go through and thank you for your time today. As you've mentioned, you're doing another session in 21 minutes time, which is looking at the finance industry, sort of business and strategy of the finance industry. I noticed that we've had one more person who's from Bhutan as well. So it looks like we've got 3 people from Bhutan. And as you're saying goodbye to us now, if anybody else would like to write in the chat box so we know which parts of Asia you're from, it'd be very interesting for us to know that. Chris is also writing in the chat box to ask which parts of Bhutan you're from. Do we have anybody here from Vietnam as well? If I could encourage you to go through and do that before we say goodbye to Chris. Maybe there's a little bit of a time delay between some of these things. So we actually have a response there.
Well, my thanks to everybody. Thanks for being here. And if you have any questions, please check in with Roger. I'm sure he can help you, or he can steer any questions towards me directly as well.
Good.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you ever so much, Chris. And thank you for everybody else for joining us on this Sunday evening. Some of you may well join us for the session that takes place in 20 minutes time. I think we'll go through and release Chris for a few minutes so he can go through and get something to eat and drink. And then we'll see you again at 7 o'clock Bangkok time. Thank you very much, Chris. And thank you to everybody else for joining us. Thank you. Goodbye.